The manhunt is still underway after Charlie Kirk, a conservative influencer, was assassinated during his American Comeback Tour event at Utah Valley University. And there are a lot of questions now to go through as the manhunt continues. And joining me now is threat management expert and founder of Coursen Security Group, Spencer Coursen. Spencer, thanks for being here.
Dan, always a pleasure.
Yes, and let's talk about this here, Spencer. First, you know what? Let's go through the timeline of events here. I want to run through kind of what has happened, and then I want to get your reaction to what we're seeing and to the manhunt and everything else.
Sure.
But we know the event started around noon, about 20 minutes into the event or so. A single shot rang out, and Charlie Kirk was struck with that shot, fatally struck. And then immediately after that gunshot was fired, chaos ensues. People start to duck and run. There's the security medical response. Kirk is taken to the hospital where he is later pronounced dead. And now we know that after the shooter, who was about 140 to 200 yards away on a rooftop, according to officials, then went off of that roof, fled to a nearby neighborhood. Authorities found a weapon, a bolt-action rifle in the woods with ammunition, reportedly, according to Wall Street Journal and others, scrawled with pro-transgender messaging and also anti-fascism messaging as well. And they apparently recovered also some palm prints and some other evidence at the scene at various parts of the scene from where the suspect has fled. Suspect not in custody right now, Spencer, and those are kind of some of the basic details. I might have missed one or two. If I did, please add them. But your reaction to this assassination?
The first thing that came to my mind as soon as I saw this news, I got a text message from an industry colleague. The first thing that came to my mind was, this is exactly why we always preach that anytime the general public has a reasonable expectation of a public figure's participation in a public event, certain security safeguards must be in place to ensure the certainty of safety of that protectee. And then you look at the layout, you look at the resources that were available, you look at the vantage point from where the shot came, and unfortunately, as has been proven time and time again in every protective operation I have ever been a part of or investigated or AAR'd or wrote white papers on, was the number one factor of target selection, regardless of circumstance or scenario, is likelihood of success. And when you have a protectee down in a bowl surrounded by high ground, and that high ground is not being monitored or surveilled or addressed, the likelihood of success for a targeted attack is very high.
And Spencer, you mentioned that he's down in a bowl. It's an amphitheater type setting there. There's buildings all around. Obviously, Charlie has a security team. There were a few police officers, local police officers around, but look at all those buildings. I mean, what kind of force are we talking about to truly secure down all the roofs and all the buildings that maybe somebody could have snuck into? I mean, what kind of a force would actually be needed for a location like that?
Honestly, you would need a Secret Service head of state level protective detail to secure that kind of environment. And unfortunately for private citizens who are public facing, they are not granted the protective resources that, say, an elected official would be, which means that budget becomes a very real part of the problem. And I think from what I've seen, he had maybe Charlie Kirk maybe had 3 or 4 protective of his own people with him. We see the guy with his hands crossed in the back of the photo there. I was listening to the university chief of police discussing yesterday how he was able to give 6 or so officers off duty in uniform to the detail. So that's 9 people for 3,000, where baggage screening wasn't being done, where no magnetometers were wanding people for weapons. And while there's always a decision that needs to be made between safety, between security and convenience. And if something is truly secure, it's not going to be convenient. But for a public figure, there's also a delineation between accessibility and safety, between wanting to be able to be close to the crowd and part of the process and interacting on a one-on-one basis like Charlie Kirk liked to do, and actually keep yourself secure, which can be accomplished. But if you are going to want to do that kind of an exchange, if you are going to want to proffer that kind of an interaction with an unvetted crowd, then where you decide to engage, the location that you choose to engage in that exchange becomes very important. And so you want to, like in any protective or military operation, use your terrain to your advantage versus your disadvantage. Yeah, and it's unfortunate that you have to think that way, but somebody like Charlie Kirk, who's engaging in controversial subjects, and you just always have to consider that possibility. I've seen a clip going around, Spencer, of him. A lot of clips are going around now of Charlie, and he talked about, somebody asked him why he does this, and he talked about multiple death threats that he gets routinely. So this clearly is something that he's been dealing with for a long time, and obviously took into consideration. But like you said, this location is, very, very difficult spot to lock down. Let's talk about the shot itself. I remember, unfortunately, we have to talk about these things, Spencer, whenever something horrible like this happens. We talked during after then candidate Trump's assassination attempt at Butler. And that one was, I think, 100 yards or so, or something like that. Very close shot. Something like that, yeah. Yeah, and so this one they're estimating at 140 to 200 yards. Talk about, with a bolt-action rifle that they found, what kind of marksman is needed for this, and what kind of shot is that? The rifle that I saw was a Mauser 30-06 bolt-action rifle, which is, imagine like your grandfather's deer rifle. It's a 7.62 round or a 308 round, and it had a very large, high-powered scope on top of it. You put those two things together from a distance of about 140 yards, and looking through that glass, looking through that scope, the target would be the equivalent of looking across the deli counter to the person taking your order. They would be that up close and personal. Missing that shot would be, that is a day one, week one infantry shot on a qualification range. And for someone who has any kind of familiarity or weapon training, that is one of the easiest shots in the world to make. Yeah. So people on there saying like, wow, this is a professional hit job and all of those things. Your assessment on that is this was a lot simpler than that of a shot. Correct. That it is there's a big difference between a professional. No professional is taking that shot, not from that location. They're going to be much farther out, which is going to give themselves much more time and distance to escape, where they know that they are outside of the perimeter of security cameras and controls. And this is not the methodology or the framework of a professional. This is the methodology and the framework of someone who was wanting to do something, did the bare minimum research and planning, and the likelihood of success was very high. They quite literally took the shot. They were successful. They were able to get away. But now you can see that they did nothing to camouflage or evade surveillance cameras either before or after. And so they're very likely to be caught by the end of the day. Yeah. What do you make of seeing the suspect on the roof there, catching that on camera, and then the fact that they were able to get away for this long so far? And we can talk about the palm prints and all of that. We have this security shot right here of what they're just saying is person of interest right now. So they've already kind of detained and then released 2 other people. So we'll just stick with person of interest for this point. But what do you make of the fact that what appears to be the shooter on the roof was able to get out of the area? Well, he was able to get onto the roof and was able to get out of the area because there were no concentric rings of security leading up to that point. The security started right around Charlie Kirk. That was it. There were no, like, typically if you think of like President Trump and Butler, you had the security on the stage, then you had the security around the, the first perimeter, then the second perimeter, then the third perimeter, then the fourth and the fifth, concentric rings of security out. This person was able to be able to access the roof because there was no security safeguards in place to keep him from accessing it. He was able to leave because there was no one preventing his access from coming in. So there certainly wasn't going to be access from him getting out. And since there were no concentric rings of security outside of that bowl, he was able to just blend in with the rest of the crowd and walk right away. And when everyone is in that panic state of evacuation, everyone is so focused on what they are doing and where they are going that no one else is looking around to see who's doing what, where, and when, and why. So you could quite literally hide in plain sight right after taking the shot.
And all right, so let's talk about the manhunt now. You're saying potentially soon, you would hope that given the information that we've heard so far that, they said they've made significant progress, but they weren't willing to identify, a name yet or a suspect. So let's talk about that decision. If they've made significant progress, maybe they don't know the name. Let's talk about the odds that they know the name. If they've got these palm prints and everything else. And then also, this guy's on the run now. What are the odds? He's able to evade. How far could he have potentially gotten? Those sorts of things.
Just having the rifle itself, they're going to be able to trace the component parts. They're going to be able to trace the sale of even if he built that rifle himself, they'll be able to trace the parts. They'll be able to trace the bullets. They'll get to fingerprint the bullets, the handwriting analysis, the code phrase, whatever phrases were on those bullets will be some kind of an identifier, as much like they were with the United Healthcare assassination. And all of those things are very good. What they need to do, what law enforcement really needs to do, is close this case, identify this individual as quickly as possible, because conspiracy theories are already spreading, from this being a state-sponsored actor to the interview that Charlie Kirk did with Ben Shapiro, being critical of Israel just 48 hours before. The fact that the question was asked about trans shootings and acts of mass violence, just prior to his being shot. Imaginations will always run wild. What we need now is facts. What we need now is the delusion of fiction. And what we need now is to understand who the shooter was, what his motives were, and really help America to heal with facts more than fiction.
What do you say to the other conservative influencers, and anybody really on either side of the aisle that engage in sort of public interaction like this? I know there are lots of others who do this sort of thing.
Yes.
I'm sure they don't want to just sit there and say, you know what, we're going to cower in fear and never talk to people again. They don't want to do that. And then maybe they can't hire an army to protect themselves at some of these events. What should they be doing going forward?
I think I've been fielding these calls for the last 24 hours. The best thing to do is to audit yourself with honesty. If you are going to be participating in a public event, make sure that there are certain safeguards in place to ensure the certainty of your safety. If you are going to be arriving somewhere, let's make that a secure arrival. Let's make that a secure departure. Let's not park the car right up in front and let everyone know where we are. Let's identify the most realistic risks we are most likely to face, and then put the safeguards in place to keep those risks from becoming a reality. Back when I was, an advance agent, working for the government overseas, and I would have a protectee coming in, and I would have a couple days to plan for their arrival. I would quite literally, after I did everything that I was supposed to do, plan their assassination. How would I take this client out? And then I would put those safeguards in place to keep me from doing it. If you are a public figure and you are participating in some of these events, be very honest. Ask yourself, if you were to target you, knowing you better than anyone, where would you do it? How would you do it? And then put the safeguards in place to keep that from becoming a reality. We do not need to live in fear. What we do need is to participate in our own protection. And when we adopt this mindset of complacency, that this won't happen to me, or my fans love me, or my fans will police themselves, you just make yourself much more of an attractive target to a predator. All we really need to do to succeed in staying safe is have a healthy sense of skepticism and a moderate dose of vigilance, and to understand the realistic risk we face so that we can ensure the certainty of safety for not just ourselves, but for our family, for our friends, for our fans.
Yeah, and this comes on the heels of that other tragic murder in North Carolina, the young woman, the Ukrainian refugee on the train, and she just got senselessly murdered for absolutely no reason because this guy was nuts and whatever other reasons he stated. Completely senseless crime.
Right, but even before that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, go ahead with your thought, and I'll ask the question.
I was just going to say, but even in that video, you see her a little uneasy as he approaches, and as he's sitting behind her, you can see her kind of adjusting her posture, and she's not quite sure what's going on behind her. And one of the things that I think would be really helpful for men, women, for public figures, for private families to remember is that while being polite is a courtesy, protecting yourself is a priority. And when you feel your body will register that something is wrong before your mind will have time to tell you what it is. And honoring those instincts can be a radical form of self-protection.
Yeah, I mean, you went exactly where I was going with that, because I mean, I can think of, like you said, you don't want to live in fear, but you've got to pay attention to your surroundings.
Yes.
Especially now where these things seem to be on the rise, these attacks out of nowhere. And I mean, I can recall when I worked in New York City and would ride the subways and other things, I wouldn't, for example, just stand right at the edge of the tracks while on the platform while people are walking behind me. And, nothing ever happened to me, but like, that's because I was like, I'm not going to stand here. And, we've seen that randomly. Somebody will just push somebody out, out of nowhere. And it's like, they couldn't do that when I was standing against the pole and facing everywhere where there was no one behind me. I never liked it when somebody scooched in behind me. And those, I think, are the sort of things that, unfortunately, in today's world, people got to pay attention to.
Predators love three things. They love predictability, they love a false sense of security, and they love complacency. Those three things are where targeted violence loves to thrive. And anything you can do to negate those three factors, complacency, false sense of security, predictability, you will dramatically reduce your likelihood of being targeted. So even you just being on the train platform, being vigilant, being present, promoting your own protective posture reduces the likelihood of success for someone who's looking to target you, because they're going to have a much higher likelihood targeting someone else.
Yeah.
The lions who were stalking the gazelles out in the wild, didn't go after the strongest. They didn't necessarily go after the weakest. Maybe they went after the one who just drifted a little too far away from the pack. Maybe they went after the one who was at the well drinking the water and just wasn't paying attention to their environment. Our everyday lives are the exact same way. So whether you are a public figure, whether you are a private family, whether you are just an everyday person like me and you walking down the street, participating in your own protection is a fundamental part of our everyday safety.
All right, Spencer Coursen, threat management expert and founder of Coursen Security Group. Sir, always appreciate your expertise. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you, sir.